Welcome to Rica Subtest 1 online test preparation course presented by ricatest.com. Thank you so much for joining us. In this lesson, you will learn everything you need to know about competency 7, which is understanding the role of syllabic and structural analysis and orthographic knowledge in reading development. In this lesson, we will focus on the key identification skills, which include structural analysis, syllabic analysis, and orthographic knowledge. The overall theme and important point to understand in this chapter is how to teach children to identify multisyllabic words. Let's begin with the terms that you'll need to know for your Rica test. Structural analysis happens when students decode a word using their knowledge of the root word in combination with the word's affix. That might be a prefix or a suffix. Syllabic analysis happens when students decode a word using their knowledge of the syllables of the word. And orthographic knowledge is the ability to spell words correctly. Simply put, orthography means spelling. A morpheme is the unit of meaning in language. For example, the word elephant has one morpheme, which is elephant. However, the word unkindly has three morphemes, un plus kind plus ly. Note here that a morpheme is not a syllable, as the word elephant has one morpheme, but has three syllables. An affix is a morpheme that, when alone, is not a word and appears only as part of a word. There are two types of affixes. The first is a prefix, which is an affix that appears in front of a root word. The second type of an affix is called the suffix, which is an affix that appears at the end of a root word, such as ly in likely. The next key term we have is bound morpheme, which is an affix that only exists when it's attached to a word, such as pre in pretest. On the other hand, a free morpheme is one that is a word by itself, such as the word test. An open syllable is a syllable, not just a word, that ends with a vowel. For example, re in redesign. Re is the open syllable. Next, we have closed syllable. And this is a syllable that ends in a consonant, such as the word map. Here, the P is the closed syllable. The goal of reading, remember, is automaticity, which is the ability for students to read swiftly and accurately, and to be able to recall and recite what they just read. The way that phonics, sight word knowledge, structural analysis, syllabic analysis, and orthographic knowledge work together is that phonics helps students decode regular single syllable words. Then, sight word knowledge helps students recognize high frequency words. Furthermore, having skills in structural analysis, syllabic analysis, and orthographic knowledge help students decode multisyllabic words. Structural analysis plays a crucial role in helping students accurately analyze and spell multisyllabic words. The skill of structural analysis is used to decode multisyllabic words by adding a prefix and or suffix to the base word or base morpheme. Looking here, we can see an example, tricycle. We spot the tri, which we can teach students that means tri means three, as well as cycle, and afterwards they will probably recognize from words like bicycle or water cycle. Another example we can learn from is undeliverable. Using structural analysis, we can find the root which is in the middle, and this is deliver. Able is in the back, meaning the ability to, and un is in the front, which means not able to. So let's have a look at the role of syllabic analysis in helping to accurately spell and decode multisyllabic words next. Having the skills of syllabic analysis helps students decode multisyllabic words that are composed of common syllable patterns in order to accurately analyze and spell multisyllabic words. Simply put, syllabic analysis leads to better reading and better spelling. So you learn syllabic analysis, you decode better, and then therefore you spell better. Using syllabic analysis helps students learn to pronounce the word by segmenting the sounds. Let's have a look. Here are these examples we have. spider, window, and turtle. Remember that structural analysis is used when students decode a word using their knowledge of the root word in combination with the word's affix. Remember, affix means prefix or suffix. Like with teaching phonics, when providing direct teaching of structural analysis, you can choose between using the whole to part or part to whole approach. First, let's look at an example using the whole to part instructional strategy. Here, the teacher will choose the target prefix, suffix, or root word to focus on and provide a few example sentences containing the target language. Let's look at an example. Billy was disrespectful to the substitute teacher. Uh-oh. When Billy's teacher came back, she felt disappointed. Hmm. Now, the class will have to discontinue extra playtime. Okay, so here are the sentences because we're starting with the whole to part. Now, once the teacher has read each sentence to the students, it's time for the teacher to now reread each sentence and underline the target words as the teacher reads. So here we have disrespectful, disappointed, and discontinue. Now the teacher will focus and circle on the common element that is found within each word. All words that begin with the prefix dis. The teacher now works with the students to decode the target words and understand the prefix. In this example, what dis means. If the students are unsure, the teacher directly and explicitly tells them the meaning. Next, the teacher and students make a list of other example words that share the same common element. For example, disapprove, dissatisfaction, disbelief. Now let's have a look using the part to whole instructional strategy. When teaching structural analysis using the part to whole approach, the teacher displays the affix that's being taught. For example, we'll use the prefix dis. Then the teacher directly tells the students what this prefix means. In this case, we would say that the prefix dis means not or the opposite of. Then the teacher creates a word web by eliciting dis words that the students already know. If they don't know any, you as the teacher will simply tell them examples. In this case, we have dissatisfaction, disapprove, and disbelief. Now the teacher and students work together to use the target words to try and create sentences. The teacher writes these sentences on the board, and the students write the same sentences in their writer's journals. Billy was disrespectful to the substitute teacher. When Billy's teacher came back, she felt disappointed. Now, the class will have to discontinue extra playtime. Okay, now let's move on to teaching syllabic analysis. Remember that syllabic analysis is when students decode a word using their knowledge of the syllables of the word. The traditional model for identifying the number of syllables in a word is to teach the children to clap out the syllables. For example, napkin has two syllables, or another one, disbelieve, has three syllables. The next content specification you will learn is how to teach the students to use their knowledge of structural analysis and syllabic analysis in order to spell multisyllabic words. Follow these steps to choose appropriate spelling words to teach. First, the words must be appropriate for the student's age level. And then the amount of words to be learned needs to be differentiated for individual student needs. For example, a student who struggles to spell should be given fewer words to learn than an advanced learner. Rica Test scores like seen when examinees use multisensory strategies to teach. In this next set of slides, you will learn ways to use multisensory strategies to help children spell multisyllabic words. To provide a spelling lesson that will help students remember the spelling, one way is to allow the children to look at a word and write it multiple times. We call this repetition. Now, let's talk about adding the visual element of color into instruction. Here, the student will highlight or use a different colored pen to write the target pattern that the spelling list covers. For example, if the student is learning the IE pattern, they will write all of the letters in the word in one color and then use a different color for the target language. Here, for example, again, IE, field, peace, cried, relief. Another approach to teaching a multisensory spelling lesson is adding an auditory component to the lesson. For lessons like these, the student says each letter aloud as they write the spelling word. Kinesthetic learning happens through motion or movement. A spelling exercise like this might involve the students drawing overly large letters in the sky with their fingers. One of the ways children love to learn the most is using the tactile approach. This means getting the kids to actually get their hands on things to learn through touch. For spelling instruction, a teacher gives the students an overly texturized piece of material, such as sandpaper or Play Doh, and the student writes the words with their fingers over this material. This approach is great for very young learners. Teachers also teach students to spell larger, more complex words by identifying the chunks of letters within words. We call these phonograms, such as ite. Here, we can teach students that if they know the ite ending, they will also be able to spell words like bright, right, light, tight, might, and even more. The second approach to showing the strong relationship between orthographic knowledge, word analysis, and demonstrating the knowledge of systematic, explicit instruction in orthography of teaching spelling is to apply common orthographic generalizations, like rules. For example, changing the ending of a word from Y to IES when forming the plural. For example, here we have butterfly to butterflies, where we dropped the Y and added IES, as well as baby to babies, and then also worried to worries. Children often really enjoy the time that they get to sit and read silently. It's very common and quite natural for children to choose a fiction book most of the time. And reading fiction is essential, but it is also really important for the students to know that they can choose informational texts, poetry, and even reference materials. Doing so will provide students with frequent exposure to reading texts that contain words using affixes, syllable patterns, and orthographic patterns and rules that are just not going to be found or found very rarely in nonfiction materials. The key takeaway here is that it is important for students to read from a variety of types of books. Furthermore, frequently engaging in writing activities that include opportunities to apply knowledge of more complex orthographic patterns and spelling multisyllabic words really stretches the students' previously learned language skills. One specific writing activity that children enjoy and is great for teachers to assess is where the teacher picks a place, such as the circus, and you ask the students to describe a time that they went to the circus, or if they've never been, that's okay too. They use their imagination to dream of a time that they would like to go to the circus. And the part that makes this a great way to assess the students' writing is because the teacher also provides a word bank. And that includes the words such as stilts, trapeze, and magician, and so forth. The children can write freely about this place, but they need to use these words in the word bank. This gives the teacher the opportunity to evaluate students in context using recently taught vocabulary. Providing differentiated instruction to address the needs of all of our learners will be vital to your success in passing the Rica test. Just as you've seen in the past lessons, the Rica test asks that you demonstrate your knowledge for these students: struggling readers, English learners, and advanced learners. Next, let's focus on providing effective instruction for syllabic analysis, structural analysis, and orthographic knowledge for our struggling readers. And we do this by selecting one of the following strategies. For example, focus on key skills and knowledge, reteach concepts and skills that are lacking, use a variety of concrete examples to explain a concept or task, and provide additional practice. Use visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and tactile techniques. Now, if you're choosing to focus on key skills, these should be frequently occurring syllable patterns and affixes and related orthographic patterns, which might include common prefixes, pre, such as in predict, pretest, or preview, or sub, as in submarine, submerge, or subconscious. A teacher might also choose to focus on common suffixes, such as less, as in spotless or bottomless, ness, as in exactness or brightness, and also full, as in helpful or careful. And lastly, a key skill that often requires additional focus for our struggling readers includes orthographic patterns. These might include rules like the I before E except after C, as in friend or believe, as well as when to double a final consonant, such as in run to running. Now let's move to another method to meet the needs of our struggling readers. In this approach, the teacher will examine the student's recent assessments and assignments to find specific concepts and skills that have not yet been mastered. And a third way to meet the needs of our struggling readers for possible interventions on effective syllabic analysis, structural analysis, or orthographic knowledge is using a variety of concrete examples to explain a concept or task. Oftentimes, this means finding books that provide context around the target language or bringing in real examples, such as in taste testing, to understand that lemon is sweet and dark chocolate is bitter. Lastly, we can use additional practice for our struggling readers. This approach works well when the teacher provides helpful feedback, where the student receives more one to one instruction with the teacher and also receives more practice on mastering the skills that are still lacking. A different approach for struggling readers is to use the visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and tactile techniques. These techniques are often combined with the previous approaches, such as reteaching skills using tactile method. For example, visual approach here, the student writes the target sight word and highlights the vowel pattern. In this example, the double E vowels, making the long E sound as highlighted. In this auditory lesson, the student writes the target word and pronounces each letter out loud. For example, sheep, sh, e, sleep, sl, e. Now, in this tactile lesson, the student writes the target words on a textured surface, such as sand, rug, or using finger paint. What we can do is we can take advantage of transferable knowledge and skills from the student's primary language, which means, for example, if the student's first language is Spanish, Italian, French, or German, there are considerable points within the language, such as vocabulary, that the student will still recognize. Next, we have explicitly teaching sounds that do not transfer. When the sounds of the student's first language and English don't align well, the teacher needs to directly teach these ways to pronounce the words and the letters individually in order to better understand English. Next, we have explicitly teaching sounds that do not transfer. When the sounds of the student's first language and English don't align well, the teacher needs to directly teach the way these letters work and sound together in English. Directly teaching the meanings of sight words also really helps for native speaking English students. Once they know how to read a word and they hear the pronunciation of the word, they often know the meaning of the word. However, with our English learners, they both need to learn how to read the word and also what it means. If we take, for example, the sight word grow, a teacher will need to teach the pronunciation of that word, but also demonstrate what the word grow means. Teachers track and analyze the students' errors so that once identified, the teacher can implement a strategy to teach these points directly and explicitly for these students' needs. According to the Rica Test content standards, teachers provide differentiated instruction in syllabic analysis, structural analysis, and orthographic knowledge for our advanced learners most effectively by increasing the pace of instruction. Doing this might mean for the teacher to teach a skill to a student using 2 lessons instead of 3. Or it might mean teaching a 30-minute lesson in 15 minutes. Next, we can also build onto the current skills that our advanced learners already have. This can be done when the teacher might jump over a lesson and teach 2 ahead. It might also mean extending a lesson or making a more challenging task or project by removing some of the clues on a worksheet, for example. Assessment is needed to build individual student profiles as well as class profiles for the skills that have been mastered and the ones that still need to be retaught. Make sure you remember that syllabic analysis, structural analysis, and orthographic knowledge should all be assessed in both isolation and in context. Also, that assessments of structural analysis and syllabic analysis are conducted through oral reading, whereas spelling tests or orthography are done through writing. Next, let's look at how to assess a student's structural analysis. First things first, remember that if you're looking to assess structural analysis, you as the teacher will be assessing for either prefixes, suffixes, root words, or all of the above. An assessment in isolation happens when the teacher presents the student with a list of words to read aloud. As the student reads the words aloud, the teacher carefully records any errors. Next, let's move to conducting a structural analysis assessment in context, which remember provides more value to the teacher, is more formal, and is used for the summative assessment. The teacher provides the student with a passage to read out loud that contains the target words inside. For example, Drew sat on a bench last Saturday morning. He gazed at the timeless statue in front of him. Unfortunately, a mindless bird chirped to the lifeless statue for so long that my dog ran away. Now I'm dogless. As the student reads the target words, the teacher takes notes and pays particularly close attention to patterns of error. Next, we're moving on to assessments for syllabic analysis. Such as it is with structural analysis, the teacher will want to conduct assessments in both isolation and in context. The words for an assessment for syllabic analysis share a common pattern, such as the initial open syllable is closed. The student reads the words aloud while the teacher takes notes and focuses again on the patterns of error. An assessment in context will have the target words inside a passage. The student will read aloud while the teacher again takes notes. The traditional spelling test, where the teacher says a word and the student writes the word, is considered a spelling assessment in isolation. Although this assessment provides insight into the student's ability to spell these words, the most important assessment is whether or not students spell words correctly when they write paragraphs or stories in their journals, which can be used to assess the student's spelling in context. And this concludes Rica Test competency number 7 lesson. Before we go, let's recap everything that we've learned this lesson. First, in order to teach children how to identify multisyllabic words, they will need skills in structural analysis, syllabic analysis, and orthographic knowledge. The goal of reading is automaticity, which is the ability to read swiftly and accurately while comprehending that which has been read. The way that phonics, sight word knowledge, structural analysis, syllabic analysis, and orthographic knowledge all work together is that phonics helps students decode regular single syllable words. Sight word knowledge helps students recognize high frequency words, and orthographic knowledge, meaning spelling, helps students decode multisyllabic words. Structural analysis helps students accurately analyze and spell multisyllabic words too. The skill of structural analysis is used to decode multisyllabic words by adding an affix to a base word. Having the skills of syllabic analysis helps students decode multisyllabic words that are composed of common syllable patterns in order to accurately analyze and spell multisyllabic words. When providing direct teaching of structural analysis, you can choose between using the whole to part or part to whole approach. If you're teaching children vocabulary orally, they can clap it out to find out the number of syllables in a word. Next, providing effective spelling instruction requires the teacher to choose the right words that the student will clearly benefit from learning and provide multisensory spelling instruction that fits the individual student's needs. Reading from a variety of sources and material is important for the students to gain exposure to texts that contain a variety of words, syllable patterns, and orthographic patterns, as well as linguistic rules. Now, in order to assess a student's structural and syllabic analysis in writing, the teacher can pick a place that most students have visited or at least know about, such as the circus or the dentist office, and give students a paper to freely write about the past events or the future experience that they imagine to have using a word bank provided by the teacher that allows the teacher to assess the student's structural and syllabic analysis skills in context. For your Rica test, you're going to need to know at least one way to provide effective instruction for syllabic analysis, structural analysis, and orthographic knowledge for your struggling readers. Remember that you can use a variety of concrete examples, you can provide additional practice, you can always use visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and tactile methods. For your English learners, you're going to want to build off their L1 transfer, and you're going to want to directly teach the meanings of sight words and identify and teach common patterns of error. For advanced learners, we either increase the pace of instruction or we build onto their current set of understandings, knowledge, and skills. Structural analysis and syllabic analysis are conducted through oral reading, whereas spelling tests are conducted through writing in both isolation and context. However, assessments in context, remember, are best for the formal assessment. They provide more value and more information for the teacher. Thank you so much for joining us in this Rica test lesson. When you are ready, go ahead, take the Competency 7 quiz to check your understanding of this material that you just learned, and we look forward to seeing you in the next lesson.